When I first moved into my apartment complex, there was nothing across the street. Now, I know that doesn't seem very relevant to a lot of what I talk about here, but there there is a means to an end to the story. I moved in to this apartment in January of 2017, right after I got married. And I didn't want to live here, for starters, because it meant moving away from my home in Austin and moving into a city that was a little too close to my first home. And it scared me, but I remember when I moved in, I remember thinking that there was too much space. There were too many fields, too much open space across the street, and I wasn't used to it. I was used to living in this open, bustling city, just crowded and busy and living across the street from an open field felt weird. But after about a year or so, I remember when that field turned into a patch of dirt, and then it turned into a slab of concrete, and suddenly a fence went up, and there were signs, and before I knew it, there was a structure being built. I could see the skeleton made of wood frame and insulation and whatnot. And I think about this building that was being built across from my apartment and seeing it every day that I would go somewhere, whether it was a store, whether it was to go get food or go run errands, whatever I needed to do for the day, just seeing the progress that was being made on this building. And then before I knew it, I was leaving the apartment, and across the street from me was another apartment. And as mundane as that seems, it's not unusual to see an apartment, especially on my street, where it's lined with these complexes, and we are one of many. I just remember that process, thinking of that open space, feeling uncomfortable having it there, and then before I knew it, it was filled. And the process of that came from somewhere. It didn't just come from nowhere. Somebody saw that piece of land and they thought, you know what, I'm going to buy that. That looks like a good place to put an apartment complex. That is going to be our project. And so there was money that was poured into it, resources, time, labor. And I think about that a lot when it comes to my stories. There's an open space and it's waiting to be filled, and whether or not I do it intentionally or we do it intentionally or it just comes to us, we filled these spaces. And sometimes I think that these projects, as common as they are, because we see buildings going up every day in the city, there's always new projects being started, there's always roads being worked on, there's always apartment complexes being put up or skyscrapers and whatnot. It's not unusual to see these things being taken on. But we forget that they're massive projects and that it takes a whole lot of time and a whole lot of effort and a whole lot of resources to be poured into these. And it takes a lot of discipline and showing up every day to get the work in and to make sure that the result is finished, that we see this come into realization, to come into existence. It's easy to forget. With so many stories being told, so many movies out there nowadays, so many webcomics being shared online, so much art, so much fiction. We're surrounded by content, and we're surrounded by content creators, and we think, well, there's so much of it, and we consume it so fast that we don't think anything of it, It's just commonplace now. And then we go to put the work into our own projects, and we get overwhelmed because we've forgotten how massive these projects are. We've forgotten that it requires a whole team of labor and resources and money and time and discipline. And not all of us are ready for that commitment. And sometimes we think that we are, and we assign ourselves the task of seeing this through to the end. And then we get burnt out. And we're left with a skeleton of a project. We're left with just the foundation. Because we don't think it's possible to see these things through to the end. We don't believe in ourselves enough to push ourselves forward, or we don't have the time, or we don't have the resources. And that's disheartening. I can't imagine if I woke up and got in my car and drove out of my front gate, instead of seeing an apartment complex where there are people living their lives and making memories and creating their own spaces, if I just saw a wooden skeleton being, I don't know, worn down by rain and sun and heat, and just nobody touching it. You know, the construction workers have left. The fences are down. It's abandoned. There's just trash and graffiti. I couldn't imagine. But I see that happening a lot with our projects and our stories, as we lose heart or we're discouraged or we don't have the time or the means to see these things through to the end. And sometimes I feel like in my own stories, I get overwhelmed with how big they are. And it's easy for me to lose sight of the end and the goal that is the end, and to feel like I'm never going to get there. It's so far away. I'm never actually going to be able to put people into these apartments. I'm never going to be able to put these characters into these stories that I have for them. All of that is to say, I guess, that I owe you guys a lot. And I hope that the support that you've given me, the resources that you've allowed me to accumulate, the time that you give me to work on these things, because if it wasn't for your support, I wouldn't have the time. I would be committing myself fully to making my income elsewhere, you know, whether it just be commissions 100% of the time or getting a part-time job, as fun as that sounds. If it were not for my patrons, I wouldn't be able to tell my stories. I wouldn't have the motivation, I wouldn't have the means, I wouldn't have the resources. And so I guess in a sense, you guys are the team behind this apartment complex. I know it's a really stupid analogy, but it's what I think of. It's the first thing that comes to mind when I think of my stories. Is I don't want to give up on this, because I know that one day it's going to be built, it's going to be functioning, and people are going to be able to use it. And that's the goal, is that I want this story to have enough there, to have enough of it be told, that people are able to take something from it. And yeah, so, and I don't know, I hope that the support that I get from you guys, I hope that I can give that back to other people, maybe some encouragement. Maybe you have your own project or your own, you know, massive goal that you've set for yourself, and you're worried that you don't have the time or the resources or the labor required to achieve these goals. And I just want you to remember that all things start with nothing. And all it really takes is your time and your effort and your dedication. You have the skill, you have the ability to tell these stories. You don't need to wait until you're good enough or until you have an audience. You don't need to wait for those things, because at the end of the day, those things don't matter. I don't think these people started building these apartment complexes because they had a line of tenants, you know, right outside the door, people ready to sign a lease. I think that they built it proactively with the faith that people were going to come in and, you know, apply to live in these apartments. So I think the same thing of these stories is that, you know, I didn't start Lucky with the motivation that, you know, I already had a fan base for it. You know, I didn't do it because I thought that that's what people wanted. I did it because it's what I wanted to do. And I have the hope and the faith that it will continue to be something that people enjoy. And so far, it's proven to be just that. And I think the same can be said for everybody's creations, whether it's your fiction, your stories, your writing, whatever it is that you do. I hope that you don't give up on your project. And I hope you see it through to completion. And I hope that you always have the time and the resources and the motivation and the means to do so. Because that's what you guys have given me. And I'm sorry, this is really weird. It's not my usual torp. That's worse than tomato. Oh, I gotta keep it in there now. Okay, it's not my usual type / sort of video. Because You can hear my baby in the background, but anyway, yeah. That's just my thought for the day, and just wanted to say thank you guys for being my team. Thank you for helping me make this a reality. I love you guys dearly. I hope you have a great day. Whatever you're doing, I just hope that you always have what you need to complete it. All right, bye.